Welcome, everyone. My name is Janine Vanderburg, and I'm Director of Changing the Narrative, which is a national initiative to change the way that people think, talk, and act about aging and about ageism. We know that ageism is rampant in a number of places, and certainly in workplace. We started changing the narrative in 2018 with funding from Next 50 Initiative and Rose Community Foundation. And in that first year, as I was traveling, I did 42 workshops. And in every single workshop that I did, what I heard when we started talking about ageism and age discrimination was somebody raising their hand, approaching me at break and saying, you know, that workplace age discrimination thing that you're talking about, it happened to me, it happened to my partner, it happened to my dad. So people of all ages recognized that ageism was prevalent in the workplace. So as a result, and because my funders were so willing to be flexible, we started something that is called the Age-Friendly Workplace Initiative. And I'm just going to share a little bit about what the Age-Friendly Workplace Initiative is or does. So basically what we do is we do presentations for employers, for HR groups on the benefits of older workers, which we know are significant, and the benefits specifically of older workers and intergenerational teams. We do, and this has been especially true in the pandemic, we started doing workshops for workforce development centers and other organizations that are trying to place older workers on how do you position the older worker. We do a lot of communication, both on social media, on earned media, about the benefits of older workers in intergenerational workplaces. And we also recognize that there are policy implications. So in partnership with others, we compile research and we advocate for more age-friendly policies. So for example, one of the things that we are currently advocating for, and this is specifically in the state of Colorado, is to remove high school graduation dates from job applications. Because I'm sure, as some of you know, it's illegal to ask someone their age, but it's not illegal to ask someone their high school graduation date. Last year, we were able to successfully advocate, again with others, to make sure that some of those federal stimulus dollars that were coming in as part of COVID relief were dedicated to reskilling and upskilling older workers. And finally, we partnered with a national organization called the Age-Friendly Institute to certify employers who want to be recognized for being age-friendly and having age-inclusive practices. So why are we doing this workshop? These are all long-term, right? We want to change the climate. We want to make things better for people of all ages. But meanwhile, we recognize that many of us are dealing with age discrimination now and also need to work and want to work, right? It gives us meaning and purpose. It gives us social connection. And, that paycheck is important for many of us. So I was thrilled when Workforce Boulder County and Lisa Jensen, who I'll introduce in a moment, reached out and said, we'd love to do a workshop with Changing the Narrative. And I was like, okay, you're on. I'm going to introduce Lisa in a moment. But before I do that, I would like to do a poll. I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to do a poll. And the reason I want to do this poll is there's this mythology to me that's been going on that the Great Resignation and that people's inability, businesses' inability to find talent is because older workers have bailed and that we don't want to work anymore. So we're doing a very short poll. It's anonymous. So I'm launching this poll now. And it has two questions, two simple questions. And I'd like to give everybody a few minutes to weigh in. Let us know if you're on this call. Are you yourself an older person looking for work? Are you someone who helps older adults with job seeking? Or are you here for another reason? And if you're here for another reason, feel free to put it in the chat. And then I kind of want to know, have you previously sought out services from a federally funded workforce development center? So those are our two questions. Let's give you all a minute to go ahead and weigh in, and then we'll close the poll. Okay, so 56% looking for work, 38% someone who helps, and then 6% other. And then 41% of you have previously sought out services from a workforce development center, and 59% have not. So I really, what we've done today is bring the Workforce Development Center to you. And with that, I'm going to introduce Lisa Jensen. So Lisa Jensen has an interesting background, and you'll discover she's very well qualified to share this presentation with you. She herself is a certified HR professional, but she started her career as a registered nurse in acute care. And then she moved on to develop programs in clinical research, compliance, public health, health promotion, and workforce pipelines. After 23 years in leadership roles, serving on the CU Anschutz campus, a pilot program that she was leading closed due to COVID funding cuts. Familiar story, right? So she gained a personal perspective of the obstacles that older workers see during 14 months of being laid off. And now in her role as Career Services Program Manager at Workforce Boulder County, she's out to make sure that others, all of us, get the help that we need to re-enter the workforce with support and a healthy strengths-based approach. So with that, Lisa, I am so grateful that you approached us, and I'm now introducing and handing this over to Lisa. Throughout, I'm going to ask you if you would remain on mute, but as you have questions, what is really, really important to us is you get your questions answered. So go ahead and put them in the chat. I will not, because we are recording this for the benefit of other older workers who weren't able to participate with us today, I won't use your name, but I will simply say, oh, we've got a great question in the chat. Sarah Brindle, my colleague, Sarah, if you want to wave, with Changing the Narrative, we'll also be reading questions from the chat and queuing them up to Lisa. So feel free to post as you go along. Lisa, this is yours.
All right, I'm going to share my screen now and we'll get started. All right, is everyone seeing the slides? Great, okay. In the midst of chaos, there's also opportunity. I want to start today by telling you a little bit about my story. So as Janine mentioned, I began my career as a registered nurse and went on to work at the CU Health Sciences Center, as it was known then, to work in a variety of jobs. I became the director of a research compliance board, developed a statewide program in heart disease prevention, helped to establish a health and wellness center, and lastly, worked on a pilot program to help people in the surrounding neighborhoods around North Aurora to get jobs on the campus. In this last role, I established a job hub, and it was considered a big success by the surrounding community. And then, as we all know, COVID hit, and our pilot program funding was cut. I was laid off. After 23 years of working on the campus, I felt sure that I would find something pretty easily. But I also, living in Boulder, didn't want to continue that commute to Aurora every day. And I also wasn't sure really what I wanted to do for my next step. So my job search was very wide-ranging. And then my next surprise was that I was surprised at the very few responses to my applications and the many rejection emails. I also found in the few interviews that I got that the interview process was very challenging. The last interview I had had was 20 years ago, in person with people I knew. It wasn't on a little screen like we are today. All my other jobs had been through connections with friends and colleagues. So after taking an HR certification course and applying to more than 70 jobs with not much to show for it, I decided to take a resume workshop at the Workforce Center. In that workshop, I learned things that changed my trajectory. That led to me getting hired. And we're going to talk about those things that I changed a little bit later. During my year of being unemployed, I've faced the day-to-day struggle of finding hope, of keeping my spirit nourished, and trying new strategies again and again. So I hope today's workshop will give you hope and the tools to succeed. Let's get started. Age discrimination is real. Older workers perceive age discrimination at rates that are much higher than in the past. 78% of older workers say they have seen or experienced age discrimination in the workplace. This is the highest level since AARP began tracking this question in 2003. What stereotypes have you seen and heard about older workers? Put your answers in the chat.
I'm going to start reading some of those. Okay, there was the whole okay boomer phenomena, that we are not interested in working or learning. We are not agile thinkers. We are going to retire soon. Too old to learn, don't want to learn, can't learn new things, not good with technology challenges. Y'all clearly understand that we aren't going to stick around. We're set in our ways. We are overqualified. We are not fast enough. Okay, I think Lisa, we've got the comprehensive.
Uncle.
Stop. We talk too much. I have not heard that one before. Lisa, do you want to go ahead and share what the reality is about some of these myths and stereotypes that perpetuate about older workers?
Here's the data. So first off, we need to know that by 2024, more than approximately 25% of the workforce is going to be 55 and older. So it's important that we change this stereotype. Older workers do want to learn and have been learning all your life. That's how you got here. And you're motivated to exceed expectations, have better communication skills and soft skills, are loyal, and actually have 4 times the average tenure of younger workers. And as we probably all know, we can mentor and serve as role models. What other features of older workers do you know to be true? You can put those in the chat.
So dependable. So someone is saying they love the intern. I love the intern as well. Dependable, experience, want to share knowledge, resilient, and experience with adapting. And this is important because there's been some recent research that came out during the pandemic, which, as many people were panicking, and rightfully so, having older workers in the workplace actually does, kind of bring down that, if you will, that tension level. People are more adaptable. We've survived through the post-2001, the September 11th experience. We kind of helped companies, our employers, get through the Great Recession. So we've seen those highs and lows, right? So that's another characteristic of older workers. Reliable, yeah. Experience, having seen the highs and lows over 50 years, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so those are some of the characteristics. Continue as you think of them, but every single item that on this slide that Lisa just shared is actually borne out by research. So the myths and stereotypes are just that. They are myths and stereotypes. And so that's why one of the things that we do at Changing the Narrative is talk to employers about these are myths and stereotypes. And when employers adhere to these myths and stereotypes and allow them to go ahead and govern their hiring decisions, they're basically, they're leaving experience, and they're leaving a valued resource on the table. So Lisa, what can we do about this?
Well, let's see. So whatever your path forward in getting back into the workplace, if it's to find a job, we recommend at Workforce Boulder County that you explore smaller organizations and nonprofits. The reason for doing this is that, number one, it's more likely that they're going to have a human being looking at your resume and your application than artificial intelligence tracking systems. And so you may be able to be more persuasive with these smaller organizations, meaning employers that are 50 people or less. Nonprofits are mission driven. And if you find a nonprofit that aligns with the missions that you feel passionate about, you might present yourself more strongly because of that personal connection and that personal commitment to that mission. Professional organizations are also an opportunity to gain connections to their job boards, and also maybe socializing, if that ever comes back, where we connect and talk amongst ourselves about our goals and careers. You may want to start a business in your field. Maybe you have been really good at writing business plans in various jobs that you've had, and that you could go and become a consultant in doing that. If you want to start a business, score.org is a great place to find mentors. It's a great opportunity to connect with others in the field that you want to grow into. And there's also the Small Business Association that can provide a lot of resources. Or you might want to gain new skills.
So Lisa, we have a question. Will the PowerPoint be shared with us? And the answer is yes, the PowerPoint will be shared, as well as a list of links, and also a recording of this session once we get the recording edited.
Okay, so great. So at Boulder County Workforce Center, we have these services, among other services. So these are the job seeker services. Workforce centers also work with businesses, and today we're talking about the job seeker services. Our virtual call center helps people navigate unemployment insurance questions, get you signed up in Connecting Colorado, find out about all the resources in the Workforce Center and elsewhere. So they are a great resource at Workforce Boulder County. We also have a computer lab, and in this lab, it's great. You can take self-paced courses to learn. If you don't feel confident about Microsoft, if you don't feel confident about Excel, you can take a self-paced tutorial through our computer lab. We also have services in helping people get their high school equivalency. So that's those two services. We put together work-based learning in partnership with employers. And so we have internships, we have apprenticeships, and that's a great resource, especially for younger workers. What I want to talk about in more depth today is our workshops and the occupational skills training. So let's go there. So here are some of the workshops that are offered at Workforce Boulder County. And these are all very high quality. And as I mentioned in my introduction, going to the Workforce Center and taking the resume workshop made a difference in my life and my ability to get interviews. And all of these workshops are very current and relevant. And one that may be of particular help is that LinkedIn 101, how to maximize your profile. And we'll talk a little bit more about LinkedIn. But anyone across Colorado, anyone across the country can take these workshops. You don't have to live in Boulder County to access these. Now, what about these grant fundings and tuition support? Workforce centers have grants that are designated to help people get the training they need to participate in the workforce. All grants have some eligibility criteria. Grants can support tuition, books, and other training-related expenses. Some are easier than ever to qualify for. For example, one grant simply requires you to have been financially impacted by COVID. So if you bought hand sanitizer and a mask, you've been financially impacted by COVID, and you may qualify for getting some tuition support from that grant. Some grants are specifically for people who were laid off or self-employed and impacted by COVID, or for displaced homemakers who maybe have never been in the job force. Grant funds also have some eligibility as to the types of training it will support. Fields such as IT and advanced manufacturing have hardy budgets, And you can get funding from more than one grant if you meet the qualifications. Some grants are for short-term trainings, like certifications that can be obtained in less than 12 months. If I had known about this, I could have gotten my HR certification paid for during my time of being laid off, but I didn't know. Examples of training that we've paid for at Workforce Boulder County are commercial driver's license, human resource management certification, cybersecurity certification, legal translation, LPN, CAC3 counseling license. And then I want to tell you a few stories of some folks that we've helped with this grant funding. We have a client who is a director of a small university here in Boulder, and she was let go due to COVID budget cuts. She got a change management certificate from Cornell University, funded by Workforce Boulder County. She now has a much better paying job at an international employer focused on improving leadership skills. Another story is of a couple in their mid-60s who had to close their business due to COVID. They took some time working with one of our career support specialists to consider what they wanted their next chapter to be. And they decided together to get certifications in animal training. And they are completing that certification way ahead of schedule. And they're practicing doing some training with friends' dogs. So they're ready to go when their certification is finished. And my final example is of a 56-year-old woman who completed training with our funding at Flatiron School in online data science. She's now employed as a data engineer, making six figures and working 100% remotely. So these are some of our success stories. And as you know, getting the funding is only the beginning of the work, and it does take a lot of effort to change paths, to go back to school, to learn how to be a student again. And we have support to help people through that. And we know that you have the resiliency to be able to do it.
Lisa, so before we go on and you talk about this next slide, I just want to kind of share some of the things that are going on in the chat, which I think are important. So there was a question about what about federal, state, and local government jobs? Somebody shared a link to the Pikes Peak Workforce Center that has a workshop specifically on finding government jobs. Others are posting other links. Someone is saying their own experience has been that government hiring practices were less age discriminating than local employers. So that may be another option as well for people. But please continue to go ahead as you know of resources, because we're going to send you all of these links after. One of the things that we always love at Changing the Narrative is how involved people get in the chat. And the more we share with each other, the better that all of us are going to be. So I know that there are, and we saw this at the beginning, that there are definitely people who are outside of Boulder and they're outside of Colorado. So tell us how we find out about workforce centers in our own communities, Lisa.
So workforce centers, what are they? First, I just want to address a little bit about, okay, let's talk about what they are. They're federally funded by the Department of Labor, the US Department of Labor. They're also called American Job Centers. And there are nearly 2,400 centers located throughout the United States. Colorado workforce centers are funded through the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment, or CDLE. American Job Centers, which they're also called, they partner with government, education, and community entities that help customers find employment or become job ready. They can help you with interview skills, job searching, career exploration, labor market information so that you know you're headed to a job that's in demand, as well as connecting you with other resources. Older adults are actually a priority for workforce centers. Now, I want to just step back and say, I have had experience in partnering with a workforce center a few years back in which it was really challenging. And I was working on a particular project, and it seemed like there was so much red tape. There were so many eligibility criteria that made it really difficult, both for the staff at that workforce center and for those trying to work with them. So it just felt like there were a whole lot of obstacles. Well, the times, they are a-changing, and workforce centers of today have more resources, they have more funding, and there's more flexibility in how we can help people. And it's one of my goals of being a relatively new employee of the Workforce Boulder County. I've been there 6 months now. One of my goals is to make our services really streamlined and effective at helping people efficiently and not painless, because it's federal dollars. So we're going to have to fill out forms. We're going to have to follow protocols. And yet we want to make that as non-painful, unpainful. We want to make it a joyous occasion in which people are able to succeed without too much burden in getting the benefits. So how do you find the one for you? So in Colorado, you can go to this website, click on that link and put in your zip code, and you'll be able to find the workforce center nearest you. Now, you don't have to live in your county. You don't have to go to the workforce center in your county. You can go to pretty much any workforce center in Colorado and be eligible for some of the grants. For the most fit, you will may get the most benefit by going to the workforce center in your county. So do we have any other questions specific to workforce centers that we should address before we move on to this next aspect of the workshop?
So Lisa, I'm not seeing anyone, but if anybody, I'm going to just pause for a moment and see if anyone has a general question about workforce centers. If you want to go ahead and put those questions in the chat, we'll just pause for a moment. And we thank you for those of you who continue to put links. We now have links in the chat to where you can find your local workforce center in Colorado. And we have another link of where you can find your local workforce center or American Job Center anywhere in the country. And the URL for the CDLE Workforce Center is now up in the chat. It's cdle.colorado.gov/WFC. Okay, Barb, there is a question. If the training we want to attend is at another workforce center, can a grant be available to attend even though they are not our workforce center? I think everyone is pretty impressed with what Boulder is offering.
It depends, right? Yes. Some of the grants, the education that you are looking for, the education is not provided by the workforce center. The funding is provided by the workforce center. So for example, that story I shared about the woman who got a certificate from Cornell University. So if the training program is in an approved list, it's called the ETPL, then the workforce center can pay for it. If the training program is not in the ETPL, we can help get it into the ETPL. So you should be able to get training funds from your workforce center for the training that you want. The main criteria is that the certification needs to be in an area that is in demand. So for example, we probably wouldn't pay for, let's see, dental assistant training, because dental assistant jobs are actually being phased out. Dental hygienist training is hugely in demand, and we would absolutely support that training. So that's why I say it depends.
Okay. Lisa, thank you. And please continue. So we know we now also have links in the chat to the Pike Peaks Workforce Center in Larimer County. Both the El Paso County, Pike Peaks region, and Larimer County have been very active overall, like Boulder County has, in really being mindful of needs of older adults. And of course, Pike Peaks, a region, because of the concentration of federal employees there, tends to, have a lot of expertise in federal jobs. So thank you for sharing. Everyone continue to be able to sharing. We have, there's one other question, and this is not, and again, this is, I'm sure, going to be an it depends the answer. But someone was told by a workforce center that they would not in Colorado, but they would not be able to get additional training because they have a master's degree. Is that a thing, Lisa?
Nope. So,
okay.
So we have just recently helped someone who has a master's degree who wasn't able to get work in her field. And I'm not recalling what the field was, but she needed to essentially update her training. It had been so long since she had worked in her field in which the master's was, that she needed a more current, relevant certification. And so, for example, she was looking at getting a training in EMDR, which is a particular skill in psychological counseling that would make her more marketable. And so we supported that training path. So just because someone has a master's or even a PhD doesn't mean they aren't having trouble getting back into the workforce. And we can help with finding a path that would help make that applicant more relevant to the jobs that are in the marketplace now.
So Lisa, let me ask a question, and you may not have the answer to this, but I just, one of the things that I'm discerning is that some of the obstacles that people have encountered are outside of Colorado. What do you do if you learn of, hey, workforce centers here are doing these cool things and you want your workforce center? What's a way, how do workforce centers decide what they're offering? And is there a way for individual job seekers to encourage workforce centers in their community to do cool stuff? I know. I told you I asked off the wall.
What a great input. That is fantastic. So how dynamic are workforce centers? That is a really good question. And in the past, people would have said, what? The government? Dynamic? No. So, but again, I think that the situation that we're facing right now, that employers are facing with such a shortage, and I know this is really hard to hear as an older applicant who wasn't getting any responses from all those applications. And I'm seeing in today's headlines that the unemployment rate is down to 4% at all-time low for so many years. And then there you are facing friends and relatives saying, so why is it so hard for you to get a job? And so this is a dilemma. And the Department of Labor, both in Colorado and nationally, is trying to address helping people have the skills that are desired in the workplace. And so if your workforce center isn't offering everything that you want it to, you can certainly try to reach out to them. From my understanding, workforce centers do get, so remember, I'm 6 months old in this job. So I have intermediate level, maybe level of knowledge about workforce centers, and maybe some of it is even beginner level. But from what I understand, workforce centers do have the option to pursue particular grants. So for example, I believe that Denver and Arapahoe Douglas Works received a relatively large grant to work with people with disabilities. And I asked our director, why didn't we get that grant? And so there is the opportunity. So what I found out was we were kind of at our capacity for the grants that we already have, and we would hope to get that grant in the future. But right now, we don't have that particular grant. So your workforce center may be receptive to you reaching out and asking for the range of services that you're looking for. It may change the decisions they make in the upcoming funding year, which starts July 1. So they may choose to add grants, or they may choose to let go grants that aren't working for them.
Thank you. Thank you.
I hope that's helpful.
Okay.
Okay, so those darn obstacles, let's talk about them. So the main ones that I learned about in my journey, and the ones that I see in others, are the resume, the interview, and the changing culture in the hiring process. So I want to tell you a resume story, my resume story. So remember, I started a job hub. I was helping people get jobs on the Anschutz campus. I thought I knew a lot about resumes, but the fact of the matter is, I didn't know about resumes for my field and my level of expertise. And so at one particularly low point in my year of being laid off, my son offered to connect me with a career coach who specialized in older job seekers. And so I met with her for my first free introductory session. And she looked at my resume and she said that it definitely had some strong points and it had some problem areas. And for example, it didn't upload properly when looked at on a cell phone. So it didn't have a template that worked with cell phones. And HR people sometimes only use their cell phone to look at applications. So my application was unreadable on a cell phone. Well, you can imagine how devastating this was after I have submitted 70 some applications, to think that this might have been what was interfering with my ability to hear anything back. So I asked her how much it would cost to get her help. And she said $18.50 to work on the resume and my LinkedIn profile. When
Lisa, can I interrupt you for a moment?
Yeah.
When you say $18.50, you're not saying $18.50, right? You're saying $1,850?
That was the exact question my daughter asked me. $18.50? And I said, no, the other $18.50. Yes, $1,850. So I thanked her for her time and went promptly into despair. And when I was able to pull myself together, I decided that perhaps the Workforce Center would have a template that would upload correctly on cell phones, and that I should go to their resume workshop. And so it turns out that all you have to do to keep your resume from distorting on a cell phone is just put it in a PDF form. But I had a lot more things to learn than just that. And so the workshop helped me so much that the next 3 jobs that I applied for, I was invited to interview at each one of them, and I got hired at the second one. So that was the good outcome. What happened to change things for me? Here's the bad news. You need 2 types of resumes. The master resume is the one that lists everything, all your positions, all your dates, all your graduation dates, everything, your education, your volunteer information. It can be as long as it needs to be, go back as many years as it needs to. The second type of resume you need to have is the targeted resume. This is the one that contains information that is relevant to the job that you're applying for. It has a skills and technology section, has relevant experience in education, and we're going to talk exactly what we mean by that. And it's going to be only 1 to 2 pages long. It goes back no more than 10 to 15 years. So let's learn more about this targeted resume. The first thing on a targeted resume is you need to have it be simple. Don't worry about bells and whistles. Don't worry about making it beautiful. Make it simple and straightforward. And so that means having an email address that is just your first and last name at whatever email.com. Don't have kitty mama at Gmail. Have your name so that it's easily recognizable by that employer. Avoid saying things like over 25 years experience. We want you to use specific language. And we're going to talk a little bit more about having results-oriented language. Other unrelated experiences, brief and is only included to cover gaps. And volunteer experience is included if it's directly related to the job and is valid experience. Janine, are you ready to move us over to this?
I think I am. So if you stop sharing your screen,
yep,
I'll share mine.
So we're going to show you a neat trick.
I thought this was so fun. I want to paste everything in it. Okay. So this is something called Tag Crowd that Lisa introduced me to. And we'll go ahead and I cannot paste it in the chat because I'm sharing the screen right now. But what I'm going to paste in, you can paste in basically a position description that you're looking at. And so I'm now going to paste in a position description from Workforce Boulder County that I pre-copied. And now I'm going to click visualize. And all of these words came out. So Lisa, you need to tell us what this means.
Okay, so what this means is that when I'm considering my resume for this job, I see that program management are the big words. And so when I'm considering how to revise my targeted resume, I'm going to use these words. I'm not going to use words that are like it. I'm going to use exactly these words, program management. I'm going to see that they want me to be able to communicate, budget, customer service, effectively manage, organization. So all of the words that come forward in this tag crowd diagram are the words that I am going to make sure I put in my targeted resume. What this will do is make me more relevant to that job posting. So the HR person who's reviewing my resume will see that I am matchy to their job posting. And you can even do it in reverse. So let's say you try putting these words as much as possible. You don't have to put all of them. Put the big ones, the ones that come forward, make sure that they are present in your resume. You can then actually copy and paste your resume and put it into Tag Crowd and see what words come forward, because that way you'll know what is your message, what are the primary messages you are creating for the reviewer of your resume. So this is really important because in my resume that didn't work for me, I had a lot of things about healthcare. And so I realized that I needed to remove a lot of the healthcare terminology, heart disease prevention, health promotion, and focus on the program management that I did in each of those jobs. And when I managed a healthy living and healthy eating project in fifth graders, I didn't need to talk about the fifth graders and healthy eating and nutrition. What I needed to talk about that was a grant-funded program, and I met deadlines, I managed the budget, and I kept it within, I was able to deliver on that grant management, because that's what this job is looking for. So, so this is helpful whether the organization uses the artificial intelligence to scan your resume or a human being. You want your resume to resonate with what the employer is looking for. Does that make sense?
Okay, Lisa, I'm going to stop sharing now, and I'm going to invite anyone who has a question about what Lisa just shared to go ahead and put them in the chat. And then we'll see if we have questions before we've got a couple of other resources. Thank you, Claire and Kim, for putting some additional resources as well. And again, we'll share this with you after this. So I am not seeing questions right now. So Lisa, if you want to start sharing again and talk to us a bit about online applications.
Okay. So online applications, they can be so frustrating. We do have a workshop that will help you with this. And you're going to just hear, I work for Workforce Boulder County, so you're going to hear me saying, try our workshop, but they really are great and they will help you. But some key takeaways about this process is unless it's a required field, you do not need to put in the dates of graduation. Of course, if it's required, you got to do it. There's no choice about it. The salary question.
And Lisa, can I interject something? So
Yeah.
Changing the Narrative right now is working with a coalition of other organizations, including, the CU Multidisciplinary Center on Aging, Colorado Center on Aging, Bell Policy Center, we are hoping that legislation will be introduced in the Colorado legislation to literally ban asking high school, college graduation dates, as well as other age identifiers. So if anyone is interested in getting involved, when you get an email from me, follow-up email after this with kind of handouts and that kind of thing, just shoot me an email back, because we need people to let the legislature know how important this is.
Janine, this is Sarah. There's actually a question though about colleges and certifications. What if the date could actually be helpful? Like, what if you did this recently? Like, college graduation and certification isn't necessarily an indicator of age for some of those higher degrees.
Yeah, no, and I mean, certainly if it's helpful to you, you can use it, but the overwhelming preponderance now, most people know if you put your high school graduation date, it's approximate for age. And so overwhelmingly, what the research shows is that asking high school graduation date negatively affects older workers. If it's not going to affect you, go ahead and use it. But what we want and what we're striving to do with the legislation is not require that it be mandatory, because that results in people being screened out.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And in many of our clients, especially the ones taking IT, technology courses, cybersecurity, it's really relevant for them to put that they completed their cybersecurity training in 2021 or 2022, because that's spot on. That's the kind of education that employers are looking for. They know that that person doesn't have outdated knowledge in IT, which outdates in about 18 months. So, so you're absolutely right that in some cases it's important and beneficial to include that date.
Okay.
It is now illegal in Colorado to ask someone about their salary history. And I actually applied for a job, or I was in the process of applying for a job in which they asked for my salary. And I reached out to the HR person and said, my understanding is that it's not legal. And she said, yeah, you can just leave that blank. So if you do find it on a job application that they ask you for your previous salary, you can contact them and ask them how you should complete that, given that it's illegal for them to ask. So the same goes for salary history as well. So let's see, I think we're good on that one. So the interview, that dang interview. So your employer, your hoped for employer, will look you up on LinkedIn. So you do need to have a profile. It doesn't have to be fantastic, but in some ways, this is an area that has more freedom it's kind of like free range. You can put that you were president of your HOA on that LinkedIn profile, and some of your volunteer experience and some of your interests, that you maybe completed a course on Coursera in word usage. You know, you can have all sorts of things on your LinkedIn that can make you an interesting person. You can also look up your interviewers on LinkedIn, and how this can benefit you is if you see this list of names who are on the Zoom call with you for the interview, and you look them up, you might find out that you have a shared background or a shared interest. And then when you're answering some of those interview questions, you can make sure, if it's relevant and appropriate, you can make sure to name drop those common areas of interest, or that you did some volunteer work at the Sister Carmen Community Center, where this person sits on their board. So it's a nice way of kind of getting to know the people that you're going to be talking to, and helping you feel more comfortable and confident and relatable. Again, avoid that phrase, "I have a lot of experience." Better would be to say, "I have 6 years experience in project management in nonprofit settings." And so we want you to, what's even better, what's best in answering questions is to have your answers ready to show the results of your accomplishments, such as, for 6 years, I was a project manager for working on helping incarcerated youth to finish their education. And 45 people between the age of 18 and 24 were able to get their high school equivalency. So you're showing what happened, not just that, well, I was a project manager. We want to know what happened from your great work. In addition, they're going to ask you behavioral questions. Behavioral questions are those that start with, "Tell me about a time." And they end with something like, "You made a mistake at work." "Tell me about a time you missed a deadline." "Tell me about a time when you were very proud of an accomplishment." These are really hard, and I had to practice a lot. You can Google what are behavioral questions, what are the most likely behavioral questions to be asked. And a key point is that when you do choose an example of a time when you made a mistake at work or didn't get along with a coworker or a boss, choose examples that fit into the field that you are applying for. So, for example, I got this HR certification, and yet I didn't have a lot of experiences in HR. So when I interviewed for an HR position, the examples I gave in response to these behavioral questions were from grant management. They were from all sorts of other things. They weren't from my HR experience. And so fortunately, after that interview, I actually did get feedback. I asked for it. And they said, "Well, the examples you gave weren't in HR." And so I had to learn that hard lesson, that it's important to think through your experience with the lens of the future job and how does it relate. Janine, do we have time for a practice, or what do you think?
I'm seeing some questions. Let's go ahead, and I want to ask a couple of questions, and then we'll do a very short breakout room where people can practice and share with each other, just making a statement about the result of your work. And not just, "I have lots of experience." So one of the questions, somebody, basic, and I think this goes to the age identifier. What do you do when you Google, when someone can Google your name and basically find out your name and your age? Any thoughts on that? I have no idea. That's interesting. I've never.
Well, they're going to get a sense of your age when you show up for that interview. So I would say that's something that's out of your control. It's not something you can change. So let it go. That's
Okay.
what I would do.
So the key is really kind of what I'm hearing about. The key is really making sure, what I've heard from you, Lisa, the key is making sure that you are tailoring your responses to whatever it is that the job that you're applying for, and really preparing answers that show the results of your work. If anyone just came up with an insight about themselves, or they heard someone in the very short breakout room come up with a statement that was focused on the results, I'm seeing Claire say, Tina nailed it. If somebody can just post an example in the chat of how you could talk about the results as opposed to simply your years of experience. I'll just pause for a moment. Don't be shy. Because Claire shouted out Tina, everybody wants to hear Tina's response. Tina, are you willing to pop it in the chat? Or Claire, are you willing to pop it? Oh, okay. Okay, Tina, we all want you on our team. Tina says,
Tina, go, Tina.
Oh, Tina, increased annual revenue from 100,000 to 500,000 in 16 months. Tina, can you come raise money for changing the narrative? Thank you. We are, but that's a great example. Okay. Someone has raised a question that I think is important, and this is something that we always think about at changing the narrative, because remember, our goal at changing the narrative is to shift the way that people think about aging and ageism. And someone has raised, I think, the really important issue. I have concerns about the focus of avoiding our age. I want to know how to leverage my age as an asset. Lisa, I told you we always get amazing questions when we do changing the narrative workshops. What do you think?
I think it's fabulous. I think that is a really important perspective to keep in mind, that you have a lot to offer. And I am not advocating that you minimize your accomplishments in any way. I want you to represent your accomplishments in such a way that the employer sees you in their employment. So if they can recognize that you raising that money in 16 months is relevant to their need for a fundraiser who can work in this particularly gnarly population and topic, then that is going to make you more desirable. I don't want you to drop 15 years off your resume just to make you appear younger. I want you to drop 15 years off your resume so that your resume will get looked at. So when I first began applying for jobs, I had a 5-page resume. I don't think many people read all the way to the end. And so no matter what your accomplishments are, if people don't read about them, it's not going to serve you. So the question is more, what is going to serve you and your goals? And if you are looking for a leadership position where where the employer is looking for someone who has 10 years of executive level leadership management, absolutely include 20 years. I included, even in my 2-page, I wasn't able to get less than 2 pages. My 2-page resume, I included my experience as being a director of the regulatory compliance board on the Anschutz campus because of that phrase, regulatory compliance. It was the only job I had in which I had experience in regulatory compliance. So I kept it on my resume because it was relevant to this job in which I have to abide by federal regulations in managing our grants. So it depends. So I don't want you to disrespect all that you've accomplished. I want you to use it to your benefit. I hope that answers your question.
Okay. All right, thank you. All right, let's keep going.
Okay. Come on. There we go. So in the very long process of being laid off, and even a month can feel like a really long process, there is a lot to digest. And you may have ambivalent feelings about returning to work. You may have legitimate questions about how you want to spend your time. And also, maybe it's a need and not a choice. Try to be clear about your feelings. Don't let discouragement and rejection thus far make the decision for how you think about yourself. You do belong if you want to or need to, or both. So you need to find a room for those ambivalent feelings and the anger at rejection. It may be in a journal, it may be in a conversation with a friend or a spouse, it may be out on your walking path, but you do need to find a space for your emotional reactions and feelings. If you don't, they'll come out in the interview. Make room for all your feelings, accept them, and recognize they are entirely and rationally legitimate. And ambivalence about the process need their place too, because it's not humane. The process of applying for jobs online, figuring out how to make your resume work for you, how to write the cover letter, all these things are not pleasant, and they don't feel like you're accomplishing much by learning them. So it's not a feel-good process. But once you're in an interview, your best self needs to come forward. So that's why you need a separate room for these difficult, complex feelings, and let them have their place and their time. And then when you're in front of the interview panel, you can let your resilient and true self come forward. One of the things that I did at the beginning of being laid off, I actually read an article about how to manage chronic depression. I wasn't depressed, and I didn't expect to be, but I kind of thought that maybe the experience of being laid off would be a little bit like depression because of the challenges. And anyway, the article was about a fairly simple strategy for helping to manage chronic depression. And the strategy was do something pleasant and something productive every day. And the something pleasant could be going for a walk, could be going out in the garden. It could be, making sure you go to the dog park with your dog. It could be anything that's pleasant to you. The something productive should not necessarily be applying for a job or reviewing the job board. It should be something more helpful to yourself. Maybe it's fixing that squeaky dishwasher door. Maybe it's replacing the burnout bulb on the porch light, or trimming off the dead branch on your tree. Something that is a small but visible accomplishment each day. I didn't do this every day, but I made it a goal, and I did practice it. And what it did for me is it helped mitigate some of the highs and lows of this experience. And that is really important. Managing your own spirit is one of the most challenging things to do in this situation. I'm sure you all have come up with strategies as well for how to help you thrive even. I don't know, that might be too strong a word, but it is an exploratory process where you'll learn things about yourself that you will be able to use in the future. I'm not saying don't have doubts about the jobs that you're applying for. I am saying that's a reasonable thing. When you go into your interview, be ready with your questions about the suitability of the job for you, the specific aspects of the job that you're curious about and that you are wondering about. That's a sign of readiness. So those are good things.
Lisa, that's great advice. Okay, yeah. So I'm curious about what you have to say about video
Oops,
call.
sorry.
Okay. Just a few short tips about video calls. And I'm conscious that I'm the person who is sitting here with like a bright window that looks like I have a halo effect around my head. So share with us, Lisa, what we should and shouldn't do about video calls.
All right, here are your interview tips for video calls. You don't want to be in front of a window that is backlit. It turns you nearly invisible. You don't want the ceiling shot where the light on the ceiling is the focal point and your face is not. Nor do you want the light from below that makes you look a little creepy. So too much light also can be problematic. And then you don't want something growing out of the top of your head. So you see in number 4, there is a lamp that looks like he's about to get beamed up. The best are indoor lighting and natural lighting, where you have the light coming from behind the camera towards you. You want to make sure your background is not distracting. You are the star of this show. Janine, do you have anything else to add to this?
Only that I need to take some of the tips. No, we will when we send out also be sending a handout that Changing the Narrative typically has when we are doing panels and speakers about how you can best position yourself for Zoom interviews, etc. So we'll just send that as a handout as well. I'm really interested, Lisa, in your kind of the next part of your presentation. And I think it also goes to the question about how do we show age as an asset? Let's talk about what are the strengths that we have to offer as older adults. And I think we'd like to crowdsource first. So I encourage each of you to just stop and think right now. What are those strengths that age brings? And if you go ahead and just pop those in the chat, and then Lisa will talk about it a little bit. And I'm also conscious that we only have 14 minutes left and we do want to get to some additional, okay, diversity of experiences. But the more we put in the chat, the more that we can share with all of you about these are the kind of things that you can think about when you're preparing for an interview. So we do have diversity of experiences. What else? Decisiveness, soft skills, team building, maturity, responsibility, accountability. Okay, that's what we need to hear. Keep them coming. Keep them coming. Mentorship, perspective. We know that things actually are going to come out okay. Loyalty. And that loyalty, reliability. So the research does show that, older workers are more loyal. And one of the things that very often, and we heard this in the stereotypes earlier, that people will think, well, I'm not going to hire someone older because they're going to leave. And we know that actually older adults are very loyal and have a tenure on average. This is what the research shows of 4 times of younger workers. Reliability. Okay, good. I'm glad somebody broader idea of ideas connection. Some people call this pattern recognition when designing new things, but it also actually spurs on some innovation and creativity, right? Because the ability to put ideas together. Another good one, larger network. Think of the connections that we have developed over time and the benefit that that can potentially provide to a potential employer. So these are all great examples. We're going to send them all out to you. Lisa, anything that you would like to add?
I think this is a wonderful list, and I think we could go on and on. When I was chatting with a friend of mine about this, she said, older employees, their life is more stable. They're not facing the new challenges of managing families. So they have a strength that's been built up from managing all of life's challenges so far.
Okay, terrific. So let's talk about the mindset that we need to develop in our job search. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, Lisa?
So At Workforce Boulder County, there was actually one of our employees actually participated in some research about this aspect of the older employee. And this is some of how we can get in our own way. And so it's important to think about, what are your assumptions and beliefs about the younger worker? Is it that they're on their phone all the time? Are these assumptions helping or hindering your ability to get hired? And try to open your mind to be approachable and welcoming to the experiences you face as a job seeker with younger interviewers, and try to park your prejudice somewhere else. And this is really hard. And I know, Janine, you have some things to add about this.
So at Changing the Narrative, we are focused on ending ageism, and we think it's important to know that ageism extends into direction. There clearly is discrimination against older people based on age, but there also is discrimination against younger people based on age. When people are described as entitled, or that they don't have enough experience yet, or they're not going to be given an opportunity. I actually wrote a piece on this, an opinion piece for Next Avenue this past summer, after a former intern of mine at my a consulting firm basically reached out and said that even though she had done the primary research on a particular area of work, the older people the older researchers didn't want her to present at a conference because they thought it wasn't her time yet. That to me is an example of ageism against younger people. So to me, we need to be allies, right? We know, and what the research shows is that the strongest workplaces are those that combine older people and younger people and leverage the benefits of both. We know that intergenerational teams are more creative, better problem solvers, more productive, and for private sector companies, I think this last line is important, more profitable. So it's incumbent on us, as we are positioning ourselves as older workers, to make sure that we're not doing it at the expense of younger workers and not getting into us versus them. It's us together, right? So thank you, Lisa. That's my spiel about ageism against younger workers. I am also the daughter of two very hardworking millennial, or the mother of two hardworking millennial women who, and so get really annoyed when stereotypes are directed against younger people. Okay, so what are some of the next steps that we can take?
So it's important to be thinking about what you really want to do. Focus on an area that's sought after in the marketplace. Again, this is something that the Workforce Center can help you with, the labor market information. And make sure you reframe your past experience when you're looking at your future representation. So I had that vast array of different experiences, what made sense of it all. And I was able to see that throughout all of these different fields, compliance, public health, health and wellness, jobs, it was program management that was the consistent thing. And that's what I wanted to go for. So that's how I reframed my experience in light of those skills. Again, think about targeting small to mid-sized companies or federal jobs, as we heard earlier. What do you need to be ready? We've talked a lot about the attitudes in the workplace, changing cultures, and how we need to be working on our mindset to be accepting of the change, and how important it is to update your resume. And the only thing I'm going to say about a cover letter, because there's as many opinions or more than there are people about cover letters, the only one that is absolutely necessary is that your cover letter needs to communicate your enthusiasm for getting that job. Be sure to do that. What else do you need? Do you need new hair? Do you need new clothes? Do you need new makeup? I don't know. What do you need to feel confident and ready to present yourself in the best light? You don't have to change how you look. You don't have to get new clothes. It's who you are that is going to get hired. But if it makes you feel more confident to put on your best color, to get, to get an updated hairstyle, that's your choice. But you don't have to do it to get hired. Janine, do you want to add anything else?
I think the strongest thing, when you've talked about the strengths of older workers, and when you think about your own personal strengths, I think that is what gives you the lift to go into any kind of situation and show what you can do, focus on the results that you've had in the past and how those results can transition. So, Lisa, I just want to thank you for sharing some really amazing tips and insights. I want to make sure now we've got a little bit less than 10 minutes left. If people have lingering questions, and here's what we're going to do. And Lisa, if you want to go to your last slide so that people can see your contact information, we'll be sharing. Lisa is offering reach out to Lisa with any follow-up questions. If there are questions that we haven't been able to answer, we'll go ahead and I will try to get answers from Lisa. We'll send them out in a follow-up email, but we've got a few minutes now for, so Barbara's asking, will the chat be part of the slides? We will selectively take resources out of the chat and put them in a handout. I know people have made some, kind of personal comments and things that you might not want shared broadly, but we'll take any of the resources and we'll include those in a handout. So do we have other questions now? And Lisa, if you want to stop sharing, we can just see.
Oh, sure. Good idea.
Okay.
So this is Sarah. I took a note earlier, and there were a couple of questions related to resources or places where people could look to find the most popular jobs right now. And I know a Workforce Center can answer that for you, but do you have any ideas about where people could look to find the right careers for now?
Oh, there are so many resources for career exploration. And, just off the top of my head, of course, IT is exploding. And there are so many resources for training in IT, even if you have no past experience, even if you only have a high school degree or diploma and nothing beyond that. There's all sorts of IT training and opportunities, and in a lot of different directions. So you don't just have to be a coder. There's a lot of different ways to be in IT. Transportation, of course, is huge. We know that truck driving is almost in a crisis situation right now with the lack of truck drivers. Workforce centers will pay for that licensure. Healthcare is always in need, and healthcare right now is booming. Many of the fields have what is called stackable training. So you can start as a medical assistant and then get a little more training, become an LPN. So that's a career path that is very much in demand. Beyond that, of course, education and childcare. And that's one we're struggling with because the salaries are not great there, but the demand is huge. And I know the state is going to have to grapple with this and figure out a way to address this problem. Those are the ones that are on the top of my head, but you can probably Google labor market information and get a pretty good report. I believe that CDLE, the Colorado Department of Labor and Education Employment, has a link on their website to labor market information, and that'll have the latest information about the jobs that are in demand.
Yeah. And Lisa, thank you. And we'll include that. Colorado and many states do an annual kind of what is called a talent pipeline report, which shows kind of all of the upcoming projections. So we'll go ahead and share that. But I think, this obviously varies very much from state to state and community to community. There are some overall national trends, but where you live will have a lot to do with what the most in-demand jobs are as well. So you really want to kind of check with your own local workforce development centers and kind of your state Department of Labor and Employment, because most states go ahead and do those kind of projections on a fairly regular basis. And I'm seeing more addition or additional resources. The other thing that we will send out is, I did a blog, I think last week, basically compiling the specific job sites that deliberately are recruiting for people age 50 and over. So we'll send you a link to that blog as well, because one of the things that you know is if somebody is going out of their way to pay for a job posting on a job site that caters to people age 50 and over, the likelihood, oh, thank you, Sarah, she's put it in the chat. The likelihood of them not being biased against older workers is very strong. So Sarah's put that in the chat. We'll send that out in the follow-up email as well. I think I can take one final question. If anybody has a final burning question that you want to put in the chat. Do we need to give you our email address? So if you registered for this workshop, then we have your email address. And basically what we are going to do is send the slides, some resources from the chat, some other resources, was referred. Okay, so if you were referred, basically you would have to go ahead and put your email in the chat. If basically most people who come to a workshop register for the workshop, and what we do is simply send all of the handouts and follow up to the people who've registered. If you haven't registered, we'll figure out how to get it to you, but yes, maybe put your email address in the chat. Anyone else? I want to go ahead and I want to give a huge, and if everyone just join me or take it off, maybe take yourselves off mute, and let's go ahead and give a huge round of applause to Lisa Jensen